Hi, everyone. Welcome to FTInsights. I'm Mike Fibus. 2018 is really starting to look like a breakout year for artificial intelligence. And nowhere is that more true than in healthcare. And today, to talk about this, we're fortunate to have with us Stuart McGuigan. Stuart is Chief Information Officer at Johnson & Johnson. Stuart, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you again.
Thank you. It's good to talk to you.
So is it just my imagination, or are things really starting to get shaken up this year in AI?
No, I think that's true. I think we've had a lot of promissory notes written about the great things AI we hope is going to do, but now we're actually seeing it turn into reality. And it's an exciting time to be looking at healthcare. Healthcare has long been a very fragmented business, and I think with a fair amount of complexity. I think AI is our best hope for bringing things together and making sense of the whole healthcare system.
Yeah, no two ways about it. Now, you have a couple of active projects there at J&J, right?
We have quite a few active projects. We've really scaled up our data science capabilities, and we have active projects in automation, in supply chain and robotic process automation to speed up processes, but probably more significantly, a lot of work in looking at large data sets, finding patterns, accelerating innovation, and helping with patient care. And those efforts are really promising.
Yeah, I mean, one of the hardest things, it seems to me, is in order to get large data sets, you need to pull, from column A and over there at another facility, and that can be maybe a bigger headache than the actual modeling itself.
I think you've identified the fundamental problem with the data side of healthcare. If I look at something simple, like if I have a headache and I walk into a CVS and I want to buy a Tylenol, I look at the assortment, I make a choice about whether it's a gel cap or a tablet, and am I going to buy 100 or 40? And, and I'm the one with a headache, and I'm the one who's going to pay for it, and I'm the one who's going to pick the package and the product, and maybe I go and get Motrin. So it's pretty easy to do the trade-off analysis and understand what I'm deciding and why I'm deciding it. But if that same event is I need a prescription filled, then I'm going to a doctor, and the doctor's deciding what the product is, by and large. Then I go and someone else pays for most of it, or even if I pay a piece, it's not always clear to me what part of the cost I'm paying and why I'm paying for it. And then I'm the one consuming it, but I didn't choose it, and I didn't really get involved with the payment. And then at the last minute, the pharmacist might make a phone call and change the product. So just understanding a single event in healthcare requires integrating all kinds of different stakeholders. And the payer, the provider, and the patient, don't always have overlapping objectives in a healthcare transaction. So, the fundamental issue, the fundamental problem is much more complicated in healthcare than it is in other industries.
Yeah, no question about it. Yeah, the cause and effect is much more difficult. And, if the doctor is prescribing, say, a statin, it's not like you feel better when you take Tylenol. You don't really notice any difference. So that motivation is difficult to figure out as well.
No, you're right. So two of the areas we've really been focusing on are design thinking, building up a really significant design group to really map out the patient journey. So don't think of a person as a person with high cholesterol. It's a person who has lots of objectives in their life. Maybe it's to be around for their grandchildren, and really understand their journey, and then integrate our interactions with them reflective of that journey. Add in the behavioral science component. We have a business called the Human Performance Institute that's long been working with executives and athletes to figure out how to align their mental, spiritual, and physical lives to make them happy and productive. Well, it turns out that way of thinking actually works out really well in helping patients go through healthcare experiences, whether it's a joint replacement or it's working on fitness and obesity. And what we found is bringing those different parts of our businesses together into a holistic view of the patient has really changed the equation. You still need the deep clinical part. You need to understand surgery. You need to understand medicine. You need to understand clinical. You need to have your relationship with the FDA. But when you bring in those other pieces, we think there's a huge opportunity to be much more effective in delivering value on the innovation we bring in our products.
Right. Now, you've got a couple of projects coming out of the Performance Institute that are dealing with just that. One of them sounds like it's closer to the coming to market commercially than the other, but tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, it's actually out there. It's Health Partners, and it's helping patients along the journey for things like joint replacement, knee replacement, and really understanding where they are. And if you think about what leads you to a joint replacement, you've probably been in some pain for a while, and maybe you've been a little less active, and so you're not as fit. And there are a lot of things going on in your life that aren't positive, that you really need to deal with, in addition to the very involved process of getting your knees replaced. And then you have the whole recovery process. So we found that by holding their hands, by bringing in videos and interactions with people who've gone through the experience and experts, and encouraging them along the way, we bring the human side to the equation. And then by doing that, we also start to collect data on what works well with what kinds of patients. And in a very exciting recent acquisition, we've been working with a company called CSAT, and they've been dealing with the data side of healthcare. I mean, you mentioned it. You got some data in column A and some in column B, and you got to bring it together. What they've been doing is they've been looking at videos of surgeries from surgical robotics procedures, and they've been crowdsourcing coding the procedures on things like smoothness and the use of the tool. And it turns out that you don't just need surgeons to evaluate them. If you get enough people who are good at looking at visual images, they can code the procedure. And we're finding real differences in those measurements between surgical procedures, between surgeons. And then we can provide the coaching and feedback to those surgeons and said, hey, here's some practices other surgeons are employing that have produced really good outcomes. Here's some feedback on your procedure, and what do you think? Here's some opportunities to improve. So if you think about it, for the first time, we can get data up front, people preparing for surgery. We can get really detailed data on how the procedure went, and then how people recover, and tie all those things together. And if you do that enough times, you start to have the data set where you can begin to apply things like machine learning and really tease out sophisticated patterns that predict better outcomes. And when we do that, we're hand in hand with the provider. We got the payer who's happy because they're getting better outcomes for the investment. And then all of a sudden we've aligned these different stakeholders into the same set of objectives, which, by the way, serve the person, serve the patient.
Right, right. I mean, so that sounds like exciting stuff. And it actually, with the surgeons and trying to bring everybody up to the same level, I guess, that sounds like a good application for AR and VR as well.
Oh, certainly for the training. And you think about the ability to simulate a procedure with a surgical robot. So our joint venture with Verily Alphabet Verb, we're putting together the next generation surgical robot. Very easy to simulate what a procedure would look like using video and the feedback in the tools. And since the tools are getting much more sophisticated in terms of haptic feedback, the feel of the tools, we have the ability to have a surgeon walk through a world-class procedure and then really learn how to do it in the best possible way. And since there is variability, to be able to take out variability that affects outcomes and get everybody to continually improving their performance and their outcomes, I think serves everybody well. Yeah,
no question about it. So this conversation doesn't sound like a typical conversation with a CIO. And so your job, I would think you'd have to agree, is clearly changing as AI starts to push more into operations, I guess. And do you think that's just you, or is it symptomatic of the position nowadays?
Oh, I love to think it's just me, but really it's the position nowadays. I've been fortunate that I started out my career in AI and advanced statistical modeling, and that's how I got employed early on, first in aerospace and defense, and then in healthcare. And then eventually that led me to a path of working on the technology components of that. And now we're at a point where there's starting to be increasing amounts of data, and then the ability to throw just unfathomable amounts of computing power at problems. I mean, things that you used to have to buy a Cray supercomputer to do, and it would take you weeks to run the model. Now you can spin up a cloud capacity and run it over the weekend for literally a few $100s. So although the math is not that different than what it was 20 or 30 years ago, the ability to exercise these algorithms at scale and at the right cost is just phenomenal. So, it's not just me, but, I see all of my colleagues pushing into various aspects of AI. It's always driven by the customer and the business agenda. So whether you're in supply chain and you're using IoT to monitor the flow of product and finding bottlenecks and shortening the manufacturing cycle times to be able to respond much more quickly to market needs, or you're helping a researcher in R&D evaluate the potential of different molecules or different products, all those things are starting to come together. And the end result is just speed up of the process of delivering innovation to the marketplace. And then when you start to do that and get at that cadence, then, you can produce great societal benefit. So, it's still early days in a lot of ways. We're still working on creating the data.
Right.
In order to be able to employ these models. But as that becomes something that, happens, as we've seen, look at EMR systems. A few years ago, the majority of physicians didn't use them, so you didn't even have that data. Now the vast majority of them do. Well, you have to make sense of it. So there's still work to do to code the data, but that's a problem we can solve with enough time and enough resources.
Stuart, it seems to me that a big piece of being able to do all this is natural language processing. I remember you started your career exactly in that. And in order to get the big data sets, in order to make data sets big, you need one from this hospital system, one from that hospital system, which means that they might be in different languages, different definitions. So that's a lot to handle, a lot of heavy lifting, huh?
Yeah, it is. And so much of the information and the richness in capturing data about the healthcare experience is in things like notes or conversations. And so I think we're at a point where we figured out that our best path forward is to combine what people do best and create data sets and then train systems to do what they do best and then use that to move forward. So you look at the company I was talking about earlier that we acquired, CSATs, which is doing video annotation through crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is turning out to be a very powerful mechanism for tagging data. And healthcare needs bigger and bigger data sets that are tagged in the right way. We have claims data, and we have large amounts of healthcare claims that we can access, but those are for payment purposes. And we have EMR data, but a lot of the important data is captured in notes. And so what we're seeing is that people are creating pretty robust training sets by either having experts code the data, like having 500 nurses coding the EMR data and creating millions of records for a training set, or having people annotate videos through crowdsourcing. And then once you get a big enough and rich enough data set, you can begin to train a system that then can be turned loose on the raw data. And that's where you get your real scale. But you got to do that. You got to get that data set first. And right now, we still have in healthcare, we still have people heavily involved in coding the data and creating those data sets. And companies that on the outside look like AI companies, you could say are really companies that have learned how to curate data, often using lots and lots of people. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But it's part of our maturity that we need to create that starting point where we know we're training the system on ground truth. And then we can use that to extend into other areas.
Right. That makes sense. A lot of heavy lifting, but hopefully with a payback down the line where it gets easier.
There's no doubt about it, and we're seeing it already. You're certainly seeing in people's service experience, but to bring together large disparate sources of data, we need all the tools that are emerging now, whether it's pattern matching and unstructured data, whether it's NLP, whether it's processing visual information. Those are very computationally intense. And luckily, the cost of computing is going down and down and down. So we can bring just enormous amounts of resources to bear on these problems. And healthcare is complex enough that we need it. We need it both in terms of creating the right kinds of data sets and also to be able to create the right kinds of machine learning models to be able to make sense of that data.
Right, right. So the Health Partners program, walk me through that a little bit. It's both, inside the healthcare facility, and I mean, do they get kind of brought onboarded at the hospital, and then it takes them home, and do they use an app or a device?
That's a great question. And it's really pointing out some of the differences in the approach that we're taking than might have been taken in the past. Health Partners really starts out when a person's first experiencing discomfort. I mean, it's a real win for the healthcare system if we get a hold of people when they're first starting to experience joint pain and maybe give them a version of the 7-minute workout that can strengthen their muscles and avoid surgery and keep them productive, keep them active and in shape. But then when they do get to the point where their best option is joint replacement, then we really bring them along the journey in a very personal and familiar and comforting way. You think of the healthcare system, it can be very scary, very cold. It's hard to understand what's going on sometimes. And so by really taking a design thinking approach, really understanding the patient journey and bringing our behavioral science insights to that journey, we can really help people along the way and help them feel comfortable with what they're preparing for, and then help them really optimize their recovery. And as we do that with more and more, and we're piloting with a number of hospitals today, as we do that more and more, and we create those rich data sets, and then bring the understanding of what went on in the procedure. And so we have the before, the during, and the after. We can start to use complex machine learning algorithms to be able to parse out patterns that predict success. There are a lot of similarities across patients, and there are a lot of differences. And recognizing when you have one kind of individual who may be very motivated by being compared to a peer group, or when you have a different individual who may be very motivated by a one-on-one interaction with someone like them and they want sympathy. And understanding what works when for which kinds of individuals really reflects bringing a personal approach to the experience. And technology allows us to do that at scale. And that's one of the real differences. The Human Performance Institute has been very successful in bringing well-trained people to help individuals along their personal journey. What motivates you? What do you want to be able to do that you can't do today, and align their spiritual, physical, and mental journeys. But it was people intensive. And so what I think we have now is the ability to bring technology, get enough data behind it, and then get the insights so we can bring this personalization at scale. And when we do that, then we're unleashing a tremendous amount of capability into the healthcare system, I think, for the benefit of all.
Right. Yeah, no question. I mean, and part of this, walk me through how you protect the patient's data. I mean, you require big data, but I assume you've got a system for de-identifying it and sort of an information exchange.
Absolutely. And in a program like Health Partners, everything starts with informed consent of the patient. And then given that, it's the data is really part of the hospital system. And for any analytical purposes, it is de-identified. It's de-identified with algorithms that exceed any requirements by HIPAA. One of the benefits of having these data scientists and these sophisticated statisticians is that they're able to come up with de-identification approaches that preserve the information in the longitudinal data, but really virtually make it impossible that data could ever be that patient could ever be re-identified using the data. And so, another area where technology gives us tremendous scale, but we take privacy and security incredibly seriously. And so everything is built with that in mind. I think when you keep the patient at the center of things and you make sure they understand what you're doing and why and how they benefit, I think we really have a very different model than if you're taking data that, from a different purpose and using it. I think the regulations are very clear about the restrictions, but if you're providing patient care and the patient is engaged and involved with consent to the use of their data, however appropriate, then you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not complicated, but not enough folks do it, unfortunately. So, Stuart, what can't you believe I didn't ask?
Yeah, I think you certainly have asked some of the targeted questions. I think it's how fast is this going to go? I think it's one of the big open questions. I like to say that we're pretty good at knowing what's going to happen. That data is going to drive outcomes, and value is going to drive the healthcare system operates, and this computing and this machine learning capabilities are going to really change the world. I think the big question is when. I think I've been right about a lot of things. I predicted natural language would be the interface to things like computing devices. I predicted it in the early 90s. It didn't come true until arguably 2007. So I got the what right. I got the when really wrong. And right now I feel good about certainly my role in Johnson & Johnson is helping driving a faster when than otherwise might be the case. But I think that's the big question is how quickly can we bring these innovations to bear on healthcare systems, solve the problems of access, solve the problems of affordability. How quickly can we do that? And I think that has as much urgency as developing the next molecule. I mean, when I think about what we do, when I get up in the morning, if we do our job a little bit better in technology, we might bring a cancer therapy to market faster, and there'll be people alive who otherwise wouldn't have been, and that's incredibly motivating. And then if we can scale, the technology, the behavioral science, and the modeling, and reach more people quickly with the innovation we've developed, well, then we just amplify the value of everything we do. So I think the when is a big question, and I think it's up to us to see how fast we can drive this innovation.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I mean, to your earlier point, one truism is things always take longer than we think. But once it happens, it takes off faster than we think. So it's a much flatter curve. But anyway, there's no question that things have changed. This year, people don't seem to be questioning the value like they had in the past. And that's a good sign, speaking to how soon it will come.
I think that's a natural part of innovation. In the beginning, we sort of had a lot of faith-based projects. If we get enough data and we get machine learning, there's got to be good stuff that happens. We didn't really know what, and we weren't sure how. And now we're just seeing one example after another where we're solving challenging problems in healthcare. And the question is, how fast can we scale, and how broad can we make access to these tools so that we're really solving fundamental problems in healthcare?
Definitely, no question about it, Stuart. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
I always enjoy our conversations. Take care now.
Likewise. You too. And thank you all for joining us as well. Until next time, bye-bye.